Welcome back to History by Lynny, where we talk about the fashion, lives, and art of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. In this video, we'll be taking a look at some of the dresses owned by Eleonora de Medici. Two of them are still around today, while the other two live on through portraits and recreations. It will give us just a glimpse into her wardrobe and why she was said to have employed 10 to 15 silk and gold weavers for her court wardrobe. Eleanor also had her clothing designed by the most knowledgeable in fashion, and although she had plenty of input in her personal designs, she would trust in their judgment to fashion the clothing as they saw fit for that time. She took her clothing and style very seriously, and on one occasion screamed at her tailor when she received one of the dresses she ordered crumbled into a ball, but she later forgave him and they continued to work together. Now, a quick rundown on who Eleonora de Medici was. Also known as Eleonora de Toledo, she was a Spanish noblewoman born in 1522 who became the Duchess of Florence in 1539 when she married Cosimo I de Medici, the Duke of Florence. Let me know if you would like for me to do a full video focusing on her life. Let's start with one of the more interesting gowns and the most controversial of the four, her burial gown. In the 1850s, 1950s, and early 2000s, Italy held exhumation projects for the Medici family, and among the discoveries was the dress Eleanor was buried in. Eleanor died in 1562 at the age of 40 from malaria and tuberculosis, and was buried inside the Medici chapels at the Church of San Lorenzo in Florence. When they came across her tomb, they opened it up and discovered her gown in fairly decent condition considering she had been buried in it over 300 years at the time of the first excavation, and now it's been over 450 years since it was made. In the 1980s, the dress was restored and it can be seen at Palazzo Pitti in Florence. The gown is two separate pieces, the bodice and the skirt, and it would have been worn over a chemise, and she probably would have worn a zimarra, an overcoat, over top. It's made from a white silk satin and has a brownish-reddish velvet trim with gold and silver metallic embroidery down the center of the bodice and the skirt, as well as along the neckline and bottom of the skirt. Sketches of what the dress would have originally looked like on have been made. It has a long train, typical for dresses during this time, which you can clearly see as it's laid out flat. In the sketches, the dress is also shown with sleeves, although no sleeves from the dress exist today. It's believed the dress would have originally been worn with sleeves, as this was a standard for women's dress. Sleeves were also made to be detachable and would be tied onto the bodice of the dress. This would allow for them to change the sleeves of the dress as they pleased, not only for creating different looks, but also for a better fit and comfort. The dress wasn't made to be her burial gown, as it showed signs of previous wear and even had some repairs made to it. It could, however, have been one of the last pieces of clothing made for her. In an inventory of her clothing, a gown with a similar description is recorded as one with bodice and skirt in white satin with a band of brown sfondato velvet embroidered in gold and silver with narrow gold braid. This was delivered to her in August of 1562, 4 months before her death. The dress is not included in inventories after her death, which indicates the gown described was the one used for her funeral gown. The dress was able to provide some information on the last days of Eleanor's life. When found in her tomb, it was observed that the sides of the bodice were overlapping by more than 1 inch, indicating how her illness had a ravaging effect on her body. The lacing on her bodice had missed eyelets, which could indicate that there was a rush when dressing her. This is also shown in her stockings, as one was put on inside out. It seems as though whoever was in charge of dressing her after her death was in a hurry out of fear for possible contamination. Now, there's a bit of a mystery when it comes to the next dress she's seen wearing in this portrait. Possibly her most elegant and luxurious gown, the portrait by Agnolo Bronzino from 1545 shows Eleonora de Medici wearing a satin dress with black velvet and gold brocade, which required 6 different weaving processes. The pomegranate motif representing marriage and fertility. The dress also features a gold netted pearl partlet and gold and silver ribbons to tie her sleeves to the bodice. The sleeves were lined with ermine fur, and according to Medici archives, the gown took 3 years to construct. Eleanor selected the fabric herself from different samples that were sent to her in July of 1540. That same month, Cosimo purchased 27 meters of the fabric. Some of the fabric stayed in Florence, while the rest of the fabric was sent elsewhere as a diplomatic tool. Eleanor sent the fabric as a gift to her sister in Spain and to the ladies of her father's court in Naples, and also had some of the leftover fabric cut into an altar cloth and donated to the church. Cosimo sent out a fair share of fabric as well, and it's reported that one man, the governor of Siena, was not all too thrilled with his gift. He returned the piece of fabric he received, citing that It did not fit his horse's livery and had no use for it as it was more suitable for church things. The portrait was an official state portrait and was replicated multiple times and sent out to friends, family, and important political figures around Florence. The richness of the textile was meant to represent Florence's strong textile industry under the rule of her husband, and the fact that the fabric was sent out across Italy would be seen as a sign of alliance. Now, the mystery comes in that Eleanor kept a detailed record of her wardrobe, and while not exactly accurate, it is surprising to hear that this sumptuous dress was not listed in the inventory. Was it just not included for some reason? Was it dismantled? Or did the dress simply not exist? If that's the case, it's pretty impressive of Bronzino to create this dress using samples of the fabric as well as some of her other dresses as an example. This is a piece of fabric from 16th century Florence and very similar to Eleanor's dress. And this is almost an exact replica of the gown from the portrait made by a costume maker in Italy. Our third dress is a crimson gown from 1560. This is another gown that is not mentioned in the inventories of her wardrobe. However, the description does match up with what her court ladies wore on a trip to Pisa in 1561. Eleanor wore an outfit of white velvet and silver tabby, while the court ladies wore gowns of red velvet and red plumed hats. I also wanted to include this one in the video because there are portraits of her wearing a very similar gown. The construction of the crimson gown also matches the construction of her white funeral gown exactly, so we can conclude that it was most likely made by the court tailor and to Eleanor's specifications. The dress is made out of a silk velvet with a satin trim with gold embroidery. The sleeves have slashing, where the chemise worn underneath would have shown through. The bodice is constructed with two different pieces, the front and the back, and are tied together at the sides. Eleanor would have probably chosen to wear a partlet along with the gown, similar to the style seen here. Eleanor was a lover of pearls, so perhaps she would have paired the gown with one of her gold netted and pearl partlets. The dress was found in the San Matteo convent, and it's a remarkable find considering that the church has had quite a bit of damage throughout the years and even went through several different reconstructions. The church was under Medici watch and received their protection, so it makes sense that the dress was found there. The dress was used for centuries to dress different statues at San Matteo convent, the most likely statue being that of the Virgin Mary. It was altered throughout the years in order to be put on and then removed off of the statues, but as it's seen here, it's pretty much been restored back to its original state. Our last gown is another crimson dress that was just recently reproduced. In a painting by Alessandro Allori from 1572, Eleanor wears a crimson red dress with a square neckline and partlet, and over her gown she wears a zimarra, an overcoat popular during the 1500s, and a staple in Eleanor's wardrobe. The dress, which is made to scale, is made of damask fabric with silk embroidery along the neckline as well as down the center of the skirt. The collar is decorated with metal beads and precious stones along the inside, just as it's seen in her portrait. This really helps put into perspective just what these bejeweled gowns and clothing would have looked like in real life and just how many stones and beads were actually on them. The satin zimarra matches her dress with its dark red color, and it's embroidered in silver and gold, creating a diamond pattern, and features a double padded sleeve detail at the shoulders. The trim of the sleeve is adorned with beads as well as with a metallic thread. The fabric and trimmings for the gown were made in Florence by a workshop dating to the 18th century, which specialized in the art of silk production, and it was sewn together by costume designer Fabio Miari. Their goal was to create an authentic feel to the dress and showcase the rich fabrics that the Duchess would have worn. Which one of these four dresses are you most fascinated by? I hope you enjoyed this video and that you were able to get a glimpse into just how important fashion was to not just Eleonora, but to men and women with wealth and power, using their fashion choices as a way to send a message. Thanks for watching, and please be sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks again, and until next time.